Coming through, Carrie.
Working? Okay, we're
Yeah,
ready. Great. Go ahead. Thank you
looks
very much.
great. Thank you for that introduction, and I'm so glad to see so many people here with us tonight. As Carrie said, I'm going to be doing a general presentation on financial aid, most specifically on the 24-25 year, and I'm glad to answer any questions. We're going to go through the presentation first, but as if something brings up a question to your mind, throw it in the chat, and either Carrie or I will try to answer it live right in it or afterwards. Contact information is right at the end, and Carrie is welcome to share my email and direct line too for any students and parents that may have questions. And I know that she has also been a great advocate and kind of mediates between you and us sometimes when you have questions that you bring to her. So all of that is still on the table as well. Okay, so we're just going to get started here and start with understanding financial aid. And so a brief overview of what we are going to review. What is financial aid? What is the cost of attendance? The student aid index, the definition of financial need, categories, types, and sources of financial aid, and the FAFSA federal aid application. So there's a lot of terminology that you'll start to see as you work through the process. And I think someone's mic is not muted. Maybe.
Yep. Someone named Joanna Miranda, your volume is muted and it keeps interrupting. If you can find the mute button on the bottom, it looks like a microphone. There you go. Good.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you. Excellent. So the biggest basic, what is financial aid? And the federal and other state governments say that financial aid consists of funds provided to students and families to help pay for post-secondary educational expenses. Cost of attendance. You're going to start hearing this word a lot as you start to apply for aid, and colleges send you the award package that they provide your student. And it can be a little bit daunting because it's often a very large number, because it's taking into account not only what we call direct costs, which are the charges that are going to show on your student's bill, things like tuition, fees, if they're an on-campus student, room and board, or what they now call housing and food, more appropriately and more contemporary. But it's also going to include what we call indirect costs, which are expenses that we know the student and the family is going to have during the period that that student is in college. And those are put into what's called a cost of attendance budget. And that's what allows schools to award financial aid to students. Think of it like a bucket, and we're filling up that bucket with funds to meet the top of the bucket. So we can award aid up to the cost of attendance. So we group students with similar qualities, on-campus students, off-campus students, living with parents students. We group them in types of degree programs. Are they full-time? Are they half-time? Are they less than 6 credits, anywhere from 3, 4, or 5 credits? So all of those components kind of combine into that cost of attendance. So don't be afraid when you see something that a college sends you that says cost of attendance, because it's going to be a very high number, but that's not necessarily the bill that that college is going to give you. The Student Aid Index is a new phrase this year, and it was previously referred to as the EFC, or the Expected Family Contribution. It's basically capturing the same information, but the Department of Ed feels like it's that Expected Family Contribution, or EFC, was a little bit difficult for families, because again, it's a number that the federal government uses a calculation to determine and it used to be known as what they expected a family to be able to contribute to their students' education, but it wasn't always an accurate number, and it really didn't reflect everything, and it could be very confusing to a student and the family. So they've now changed the terminology to student aid index. They have changed parts of the calculation to, again, modernize it and understand what expenses families in reality have. Um, so the student aid index is, as this says, it's a number resulting from the evaluation of a student's and families, if it's a dependent student's, approximate financial resources for a student's post-secondary education. And that's comprised of the student data that they're putting in financial aid applications and the parent data for a dependent student or a spouse if you happen to be a married student. So that's where that student aid index is going to come in. And student aid index refers specifically to the FAFSA, the federal calculation, but other types of financial aid use a similar methodology and similar data that they're capturing. Okay, as we talked about, that cost of attendance and the student aid index walk into a calculation that then becomes your financial need, that bucket of money that we're going to kind of use to be able to award a student financial aid. And out of that, there's need-based aid and there's non-need-based aid. Need-based aid is what most people think of as financial aid. There are things such as grants, like the Pell Grant, like the State Tuition Assistance Program or the TAP grant. They are subsidized loans that come through the federal application. So non-need-based aid is that aid that's available to a student that goes above what we call their need or their budget, but it's within their cost of attendance. A lot of terminology that you may not get intimately involved in, but there are different types of big categories of aid. And the majority of aid that you'll see at a two-year school is need-based aid. Types of financial aid. Again, this is sometimes a little bit of a terminology um, bubble here. So you have grants, your Pell Grant, your federal SEOG, your state TAP grant. Grants are usually money that financial aid monies that don't have to be paid back to the institution or the government that is awarding them. Loans are considered financial aid, but they do have to be paid back. So federal direct loans come right through the FAFSA application. There's not a separate application for those federal direct loans. They are typically going to be your lowest interest rate versus an outside lender like a bank or a credit union that is offering student loans. So if you are a student and family that's taking loans, just be very aware of the terms and conditions and the interest rates of them. Scholarships. Scholarships can be thought of as kind of the sister to a grant. They're typically not required to be paid back. Institutional, state, and private scholarships. An example of an institutional scholarship would be one that comes directly from the college that your student is attending. So if you're attending Cayuga, it would be one of our college foundation scholarships that would come directly through us. States offer certain scholarships. There are scholarships through the New York State agency that awards state aid, which is the Higher Education Services Corporation. There's also private scholarships through employers of either the student or the parent, churches, civic organizations. So there's all types of scholarships that are out there. And while they're a separate type of financial aid, they're very similar to a grant type of financial aid. Some really key things for you to remember no matter where you're applying or what type of aid you're applying for. Understand what the deadlines are for every application because they're going to be different. Your FAFSA has a different application deadline than institutional aid. And when we also talk about deadlines, make sure you're understanding what your college application deadline is too. And I'm sure Ms. Carey talks to you all about that, about staying on top of when those college applications are due, because the financial aid isn't going to matter if you don't get your college application in on time. Understand the application procedures, not just for the federal and the state applications, but your college applications, your scholarship applications. Some, some of the financial aid, especially the state financial aid, they do have residency requirements. So if you're planning to go to a college outside of New York State, you may not qualify for certain types of state financial aid that's offered there. We recommend researching and completing everything as early as possible. There are a lot of competition out there, especially for scholarships. Get those applications in early. Make sure you understand the instructions and do them completely. And above all, organize, organize, organize. Make sure you have one place that you're keeping everything together, all of your logins, all of your applications. Keep a copy of all of your applications, even if they're an online application. Save a PDF of everything and keep it in one place, either a paper folder, an old-fashioned paper folder, or a digital folder, so you always know right where to go. Sources of financial aid. We've talked a little bit about this already. The largest source is the federal government, your Department of Ed, your federal student aid. So we use these terms a lot, and they're very interchangeable. So federal government, the Department of Education, and federal student aid are all, when we talk about those, we're talking about federal aid. The state in which the college is or in which you are a resident is a source of financial aid. The college or the university that you attend is a source of financial aid. That's what that institutional aid that we talked about is. And then there's those private sources like the employers, churches, organizations. The federal government is the largest source of financial aid in the United States. It is aid provided primarily based on financial needs. So those are those grants that we called on the first couple of slides, that Pell Grant, that SEOG grant. You have to apply every year using the FAFSA, which stands for the Federal Application, Free Application for Federal Student Aid. So every year you have to do that FAFSA. And there's eligibility requirements that must be met. Things like US citizen or a non-eligible citizen, things like academic progress. So all of these components are going to come into your federal financial aid. Your state financial aid, as we said, the residency requirements usually apply for state financial aid. It can be based on both merit, which is a word for your academic progress. If you're a high achieving student, there are merit-based scholarships, and it's based on financial need like the federal applications are. It does use information from the FAFSA and or other specific state aid applications for the particular type of aid you're applying for. As an example, the TAP grant requires you to complete a FAFSA, but it also requires you to complete a state application. And the deadlines vary by state, so watch those deadlines especially. Colleges and universities, these are those institutional scholarships. And again, they can be based on both merit or academic achievement and financial needs. So there are components of both for both of those types of students. And like the state aid, it uses information from the FAFSA or the specific institutional application. So watch the deadlines on those too, because many times colleges and universities have an early deadline where you are going to be considered for the maximum amount of aid. And basically what that means is the institutional aid, because there's usually a limit to the institutional aid that colleges and universities have. So many times it's awarded on a first come, first served basis. So get those applications in early. And again, watch those deadlines. The private sources we talked about are those private foundations within a community, businesses, churches, employers, and civic and charitable organizations. Um, Parents and students, talk to your employers, see if they have specific scholarships that come through them as either being an employee or a student who has parents who are employees. Again, those deadlines and application procedures, make sure you're watching those and research those early as well, because again, limited funds, first come, first serve. Okay, let's talk a little bit specifically about New York State financial aid, especially for students who are considering the majority of their colleges and universities in New York. The one that most families and students hear about is the Tuition Assistance Program, commonly referred to as TAP. Recently, they extended the eligibility for part-time TAP. There used to be very specific requirements for those. They have revamped that so that more part-time students are eligible for that, because the part-time student population is growing. So they've opened that up. The Excelsior Scholarship, an excellent scholarship to keep students who are on track to graduate on time. 2-year school in 2 years, a 4-year school in 4 years. It is a scholarship program, so there are very specific requirements, credit earnings wise, and staying on track. The Excelsior Scholarship is a little bit unique in terms of the application period, because it's only offered 2 times a year. It's offered for a fall entrance student and a spring entrance student. So make sure that you are staying on top of those. And if you have any questions about when those scholarship applications are available, I can send some information to Ms. Carey and she can share that with you. But you can sign up for reminders of when the scholarship application is going to be available for the particular term you're interested in. But typically, so right now we would be moving into a spring semester. The spring Excelsior application is usually available from about November into a little bit into January. So it's right before a semester starts. The August. So those are kind of some guidelines of when it has historically been offered, but just be very aware that it is a limited application period. So it's an excellent scholarship. It's going to cover tuition only, and it's what we call a last dollar scholarship, which means everything else gets applied to tuition first, and then Excelsior will make up any difference in that. And when we say everything, we're talking only about grant and scholarship aid, not loans. So it doesn't consider loans applying to tuition first. The other thing to remember about Excelsior, like I said, there are very specific credit earning guidelines and eligibility. Even if you, for instance, say you apply and are approved by the state to be an Excelsior Scholar, but you have other aid that's covering your tuition, you still have to meet all of those credit earning guidelines to remain eligible in the program, even though you're not getting a monetary award. So be sure that you're considering that in the process. Available sometimes through an application through your high school or directly with HESC. And hesc.ny.gov is the website for that Higher Education Services Corporation. It is full of information, and it's an excellent resource, and that will be the resource website that you use to sign up for an email reminder of when the Excelsior Scholarship application is open.
Mary Brooke,
Yes.
1 second. When you were talking about the deadlines for the fall semester Excelsior scholarship, I don't know if it happened to everybody else, but you froze up on my end.
Oh, dear.
So I heard August, but we
Okay.
didn't
Yep,
hear
the
the date.
start is
Could you
May.
repeat that again?
Yep, it's usually mid-May to late August for a fall application for Excelsior. Thank you for, making me aware of that. Good. So, we'll talk a little bit about the elephant in the room because I think everybody has heard that the 24-25 FAFSA application is delayed. It's usually available October 1st. Federal student aid is right now tentatively saying a late December launch of that. However, the New York State TAP application is available right now. So for our seniors that are getting ready for the 24-25, you can do the New York State application if you are most likely going to go to a New York State school. Here are the caveats on that. Some of us aren't convinced that the plan is that you can, because it's kind of doing it backwards. Normally, you would do the FAFSA and then you would take the link to the state. Now you're doing the state and they are saying that it's going to link to the FAFSA when you do the FAFSA. Hasn't been tested, so we're just a little cautious about that. The other thing to know is that yes, you can do this now, but if you don't do your FAFSA by February 15th, 2024, the TAP application goes away and you'll have to do it all over again. So I will say it's good practice. There's nothing wrong with getting in there, creating your student login, and getting it done. It's a much shorter application than the FAFSA. So worst case scenario, if it does time out and exhaust and you have to do it again, at least you have the same, it's going to use the same logins. So you've already created those login IDs for it and you know what to expect from it. So I don't think there's any um, significant downside to doing it right now, and it would be one less thing to go away, assuming federal student aid gets that FAFSA out in time and it can all get done by that February 15th date. So the FAFSA, this is the biggie. This is that federal application. So what is the FAFSA? It's the free application that's going to collect the demographic. Those are things like yours and your parents' date of birth, um, social security numbers, things of that nature, and the financial information of both the student and the parent, or if the student is married, that spouse. So the FAFSA always uses what we call prior year. So that means the tax information and income information from 2 years ago from the early date on the year. And when we say year, we're talking about an aid year. So it's not a calendar year when you're in college. Your academic year and your aid year actually overlap. They span 2 different years. So your fall semester is in one year, your spring semester is in the second year. So you're going to refer to it as, in this case for next year, the 24-25 aid year or academic year, because you're spanning those 2 years. And the prior year for your information, your financial information, goes 2 years back from that earliest date. So for the 2024-2025 application period, you're using taxes and income information from 2022. So it can get a little confusing, but you're always welcome to give us a call. You can put up to 20 colleges on the FAFSA now. Previously, it was 10. Again, if you're going to be in a New York State school and you are most likely going to apply for TAP or Excelsior, the first New York State school that you put on your FAFSA is the college code that's automatically going to go on your TAP application. You can change it. You can easily change it after the fact, but just know that when you're doing that TAP application, it's going to automatically pre-fill in the college code for the first New York State school you put on your FAFSA. So you can change it, but just be aware of that. Say you thought you were going to go to one New York State college, subsequently you decide that you're going to a different one, make sure you change that college code or your new school won't even receive the application information from the state. The FAFSA is going to be available in multiple languages, whereas prior to the 24-25, it was only available in English and Spanish. Okay, we talked a little bit about this already. For the 24-25 academic year, the FAFSA is projected to be available late December 2023. So highly encouraged to file early because many schools aren't changing a lot of their other deadlines, early decision deadlines, any of that, any scholarship first comes first serve pieces. They're currently not changing those, but depending on that actual launch date and what we see out of that, I would not be surprised if there's some flexibility in that. Now, there's a couple different ways to do the FAFSA. There's an online version. There's a paper version. We have always and will continue through the 24-25 year to recommend, as is federal student aid, to do the online version versus the paper version. Several reasons for this. It uses a methodology called skip logic, so that the way you answer one question is going to determine if you have to answer subsequent questions, and it may make it a much shorter application by using the online version, because an answer you give on one part of the application may delete the necessity to answer something further along. The online one gives you really detailed instructions. It gives you little bubbles that you can hover over, where it will give you more information on what the question really means, and it gives you a digital online option to ask for help. And it's much faster processing than doing the paper version. You'll have to fill out all of the questions. There's limited instructions, and then you have to mail it to federal student aid. It cannot be processed at the school. Studentaid.gov. This is the website address for your federal aid. This is the website that you're going to go to when the FAFSA is available to complete the FAFSA. It's the website you go to for your student and your parent to complete an account, or what's called an FSA ID. And each student and at least one parent is going to need an FSA ID. And this is what it's going to look like when you log into federal student aid, that's studentaid.gov. It's going to bring you over to a screen that in the upper right will have, in kind of grayish lettering, we're assuming this isn't going to change between now and late December, that says log in or create account. If you're a parent who has other children who have completed a FAFSA, you're using the same FSA ID you may have already completed for their FAFSA. But if you're a student, you are probably going to need to create a new account. And if you're a first-time parent doing this, you'll need to create an account. So as soon as you click on that create account, it's going to bring you to the screens to create that FSA ID. And like this says, it's going to be used not just in this year's FAFSA and not just for the FAFSA. It's used throughout the financial aid process, including additional years after this year, and it's for to access most of the U.S. Department of Ed websites. This is the tricky part here. Only the owner, and when they say owner, they mean either the student, their parent, or if the student is married, their spouse, should be creating that FSA ID, because there are very specific retrieval instructions for it. And if you're creating it for someone else, make sure that you share the questions that you chose as your challenge questions and the answers that you chose, because no college has access to that FSA ID. So unfortunately, the college or university can't help you retrieve it. They don't have access to that. So you would have to work directly with federal student aid to retrieve anything that you can't on your own through the retrieval process. Okay. You may have heard this word, simplification this year. So through the Future Act, the 24-25 is what's being called the FAFSA Simplification Act. And yes, there are parts of the process that are going to be much simpler than before. There's also going to be some differences that we're all going to help each other through. I'm the parent of a second-year college student, so I'm going to be going through this with you. And I myself am a little um, fearful of it just because it's new. But I think, uh, like I was at the first FAFSA I did before I even came into financial aid, if you read the questions and answer the question just one by one, it's like taking a test, just answer a question one by one, and it's going to walk you through the process. So federal student aid has told us that they have created a short video at the beginning of each application process piece that's going to give an overview of the new process with a little bit of information on there. So I think that's going to be really helpful for the student and the parent. Okay, so again, for those of you who may have done a FAFSA before, there's going to be some more terminology that's new to you. Something called a contributor. So right now for the 24-25 FAFSA, there is going to be a requirement for an FSA ID for the student and all contributors. And you're going to need name, birthday, and social security number in most cases to create that FSA ID. A dependent student, which most of you probably are, now must electronically invite your parent to contribute to the FAFSA if the parent information is required. And for most dependent students, that parent information is going to be required. This is a fancy way of saying it's going to require you to send an email to your parent to notify them that they need to put their information in. Divorced or separated parents, this is something new too. The FAFSA parent, and when we say divorced or separated, we're assuming that the parents don't live together, that the child lives with one of the parents. Previously, the FAFSA parent, the parent whose information needed to go on the FAFSA, was most simply designated as the parent that the student lived with. So beginning with the 24-25, the the driving factor is who provides the most financial support to the student, regardless of where they live. So that's a decision a family is going to most likely need to make on their own. So if there is an issue with divorce separated parents, you have to determine who provides the most financial support to that student, and that's the parent who whose information goes on the FAFSA. Independent students and a dependent student's parent must electronically invite their spouse to contribute to the student's form if the spouse information is required. So the dependent student's parents, an example of that would be if the parents are unmarried but living together. That would be an example of where a dependent student's one parent must invite the other parent to put information in there. So that would be the situation that you would need both parents to be electronically invited. The second new process and term we hear in the 24-25 cycle is consent. So now students and contributors, and remember those contributors are either a student's spouse or the student's parent, must provide consent to retrieve and disclose federal tax information from the IRS for the student to be eligible for aid. And it's going to exchange the information from the IRS directly into the FAFSA. This consent is required even for non-tax filers. So it's going to attempt to retrieve it. If it doesn't find it, that's going to be verification that there's a non-tax filer. So in some ways, it's going to eliminate, we hope, some of the requirements for those non-tax filers, but it is an additional step that needs to be taken in the FAFSA process, and it's going to be part of the application. So it's still within that application, but it is going to be a term that you'll see now, at least in the 24-25 year, that consent piece. Another new piece this year is that some of the smaller family farms and businesses must now be reported as assets, where some of those smaller ones in the past have not needed to be reported. However, the federal Department of Ed and we as institutions realize that many of those smaller farms and businesses are operating at a loss most of the time. So it is not the value of the farm or business if you were to sell it, it's the on paper value of it financially. So not in terms of what it could be worth, but what it is actually worth. And unfortunately, there are a lot of costs and expenses that go into running those businesses. So we're hoping that that is a smaller impact than we're bracing for. Okay. Unusual circumstances. So when you're doing a FAFSA, um, we've talked about now, especially because we have our high school seniors here, and we're talking about those contributors being the parent. But there are some circumstances for students that an institution has the ability to change a student's dependency status from a dependent student requiring parent information to an independent student who would be applying on their own without parent information. And that new this year with the 24-25 is they are going to indicate that on their FAFSA. There are some specific guidelines of what constitutes a potentially independent student. And previously, they would have needed to provide the documentation to the school first before federal student aid would determine the information to make them eligible for financial aid. Federal student aid is now going to make them provisionally independent, so at least they can start getting an award package. They'll still need to provide documentation, but at least they have an idea of the type of awards they're going to be getting from a school. And so you would initially make those designations in the FAFSA, and then you would contact the college's financial aid office for the following steps of how to provide that documentation and complete the process. Similar but not the same, special circumstances. So we just talked about unusual circumstances. Special circumstances are more financially related. So remember we talked about how the FAFSA is going to look at income and tax information from 2 years ago or prior. A lot can happen financially in 2 years, and the income of a student and a family 2 years ago may be substantially more than they're making now. So this gives the ability of you're still going to use the prior income and tax information in the FAFSA, but then you're going to contact the college or the university that you are interested in attending and tell them your circumstance, and they should have an appeal process where you provide documentation of the current income and see if that changes some eligibility, especially for grant money. So some instances of a special circumstance would be a loss of employment or income in a family, a divorce where now you have an income earner no longer in the family that was 2 years ago. You have a parent or a spouse death, or if you have high medical or dental expenses that aren't covered by your insurance. So these are just some of the examples. There are very unique examples to both unusual circumstances and special circumstances. So we would certainly invite you to reach out to us if you're more comfortable going through Miss Carrie, and then she can contact us, whatever is most comfortable for you, because a lot of times these are very personal experiences and circumstances, and we want to help you through them, and we would only ask you to share the information necessary to help benefit you through the process. So if we ever ask you anything that seems very personal, there's a very specific reason for doing it, and it's in the best interest of the student that we're asking. But we certainly do understand um, the sensitivity of a lot of those pieces. So I hope you feel comfortable reaching out to us if you are in either of those circumstances. Yeah, there's a lot we don't know yet about what 24, 25 is going to look like. So we're going to work through it with you. We're going to hopefully find some answers to the questions we have. We're going to do our best to find answers to the questions you have. And you can always contact us. So this is our contact information. This is our main office phone number and our main office email. Um, if you know, there's a lot of times you can't get to us live on the phone, but it does give you the ability to leave a voicemail, and we call those voicemails back as soon as possible. So I hope you won't hesitate to reach out to us when you need us. Do we have any questions in the
Nothing's
chat?
in the chat, but if anyone wants to unmute and ask a question, you can feel free, or you can type it into the chat, either way.
Absolutely. Do any of you have any ideas of where you want to go to school right now? Is it a 2-year? Is it a 4-year? In-state? Out of state?
Looking at the names of the people on here,
Oh,
most
there we
people are
go.
going in-state.
Okay,
Yep.
fantastic. So you definitely want to get on that Excelsior watch list. So that's that hesc.ny.gov. Let me see if I can share that right now. Give me a moment here.
I've been talking to the students since last spring about the Excelsior Scholarship. I have a flyer right here in my office that I've been giving out that talks about the requirements to be eligible for it.
Fantastic.
And so if anyone on tonight wants to have one of those flyers, they can come and get it from me.
Yeah, and as soon as I can get this up on here, I'll give you a little more information. Okay. Can you all see the HESC website here
Yep, we
now?
can see it.
Okay. So this is the website that I said has just an abundance of information on all of the state programs. So when Excelsior becomes available as an application, it's going to be right here. It's going to be right and on top of the landing page. But you can also, I think it will. Let's see. Okay. Yep. So if you just type Excelsior into their site search box and then go to the Excelsior Scholarship Program, right here is where you can enter your email or cell phone number to be notified when the next application becomes available. All right, I want to read some of these chats because they look good. All right, SUNY Brockport.
Can you read the question out loud in case somebody doesn't have the chat up?
Sure. We have a parent who says the son has been accepted by Brockport, been offered a scholarship, would like to attend Cortland, but hasn't heard from them yet. Can they expect a similar scholarship offer from Cortland if he's accepted? Not necessarily, no. But you can always contact a school and say, hey, this is our award package we got here. Is there any, if they're not substantially in line or equitable, you can always contact the school that you really want to go to and ask if there's any additional scholarships that you could be considered for. It never hurts to ask. They may not say yes, but at least I will tell you, a lot of institutions have scholarships that go unawarded. So it never hurts to ask. And then we have a student who looks like 4-year in-state, but a private institution. Does this affect eligibility for Excelsior or TAP? So it does not affect the eligibility for TAP. It does affect Excelsior. Excelsior, so there's two components to the particular Excelsior brand. Excelsior is the scholarship that is available to 2- and 4-year public institutions. The Enhanced Tuition Award, or the ETA, is the sister of Excelsior that's offered at 4-year privates. 4-year privates are not required to offer the Excelsior, or the ETA. So you would want to check with the institution to see if they offer the Enhanced Tuition Award. Okay. And also divorce separation based on residence or legal documentation. That's a good question. There's still some questions out about whether it has to be a legal court ordered separation or divorce. Previously, it has not had to be, and documentation was not required. So we do not have a full clarification on this yet. So we're leaning towards business as usual and divorce separation to not require documentation until we know further. Okay. Yeah, I think you're right, Miss Carrie. A lot of 4-year in-states. Great. Um, and then question from a parent, how long can a student wait before agreeing to a school that has accepted them if they are waiting to hear back from other schools? Well, decision day is still May 1st for the 24-25 cycle, to the best of our knowledge. So they can wait till April 30th. And but again, what we were talking about with the parent of the student accepted at Brockport, waiting for Cortland, contact them. Contact the school that you want to go to, but uh, be patient because everybody's going to probably be contacting them at the same time. So again, another encouragement to get everything done early, get it in early, and then because schools will start processing, they want to get it done early too. But they're going to be looking at those student applications as quickly and as thoroughly as they can. But it never hurts to contact them because they're dealing with a lot of applications, and it never hurts to get a name in front of them, if I can say it that way, and to kind of create a relationship with the school. Is it okay to contact schools to inquire about the status of an application? When you apply, most schools will tell you what that process is to check on the status of an application. They may have a portal that gives you an enrollment status update. Each school's a little differently, and they'll, in most cases, when a student is applying, they will tell you what that contact methodology is. And they will also encourage you to have your student contact them to your student. So unless you have a specific document on file with them called a FERPA, which is a Federal Education Rights Privacy Act document. So get your student comfortable talking with their school and their financial aid office and their admissions office and everybody. There's no harm in you being part of that call, but make sure your student is definitely a part of that process. Anything else?
Okay, looks like not. Well, thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you,
Yeah,
Mary Brooke.
I'm so glad to have you all here. And like I said, if you have any questions, you have our contact information from the last slide, and you will get the recording and the slide presentation. You feel free to reach out to us anytime, and hopefully we'll continue to get good, solid information from federal student aid and can be pleased with a successful rollout of the 24-25 year for all of your students.
Yes, and I'll be sure to send an email and a message on Remind the minute I hear that the application is open, so everyone will know.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. All right. Well, thank you all again. Have a great rest of the evening, and we hope to hear from you if you have questions.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.